Climate change is one of the biggest challenges we face today. It is already affecting people and nature across the globe, with developing countries being most impacted. There is an urgent need for investment to enable vulnerable communities and ecosystems to adapt to climate change. Yet funding is in short supply. The government of the Netherlands has committed to addressing this need by making €160 million available through the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, known as the DFCD. Managed by a pioneering consortium of FMO, Climate Fund Managers, SNV and WWF, the DFCD will work with the private sector to catalyse over €500 million in additional funding for bankable projects across the world. These projects will boost the health of fresh water, forest, agricultural and ocean ecosystems, and improve water management. Critically, the DFCD will help vulnerable communities to adapt, drive sustainable development, and strengthen global efforts to tackle climate change. The fund is ready to build new partnerships. So join us in our mission to create a more resilient future.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we tackle this topic of developing green climate solutions towards investment readiness. My name is Irene Mwaura. I'm the Project Officer, Energy and Climate Change, and I work for WWF Kenya. I'll be your moderator today. Climate change is with us right now. We cannot run away from it at the moment. We are facing greater impacts and severe impacts due to climate change related risks. And it means that we need to take action now rather than later so that we are able to be with the 1.5 degrees Celsius trajectory as per the Paris Agreement. Businesses play a vital role in terms of ensuring that as a community, as countries, and as the world, we are able to adapt to and address climate change impacts by ensuring that communities, the economy is sustainable or is resilient to climate change. And for us to be able to do this, it means that businesses should be able to access actually reliable financing so that they can be able to develop and adapt to climate change impacts. And in terms of developing, it means moving towards a low carbon development pathway and ensuring that the businesses that come up are actually green and benefit both people and nature. So to unpack this topic, we will be having various speakers who will be talking about the DFCD, which is the Dutch Climate Fund for Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, as has already been alluded to in the video that was shared beforehand. And we will be having this discussion for about 1.5 hours, and it will be an interactive session whereby we will call upon all the participants to share any questions they may have on chat. And at the end, towards the end of the session, we are going to have an open Q&A session so that we can have a really interactive session. We hope that with this session, people will be able to learn more about what is DFCD, what are bankable nature solutions. I do not want to delve much into the details of what DFCD and bankable nature solutions are, because my colleagues will be talking about that as we move along with the session. And we note that we've got participants from various parts coming from various parts of the world, and we would like to urge you to share on chat the city and country you are joining us from, so that we can really have that map in terms of seeing the diversity that we have as we continue to have this discussion. And we hope that we will have a very interactive session. Without much further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker. That is Mr. Art Mulder. He's the portfolio manager, climate at the at the Dutch Entrepreneur Development Bank, and he is responsible for the climate facility within that within FMO, and I hope you will be able to give us an overview of what DFCD is and what we can do in terms of accessing it. Over to you, Mr. Art.
Thank you very much, Irene. I'm really looking forward to this fantastic session, and compliments to the organizers of FENCAL, because actually if you talk about an event related to businesses and development in Africa on such a scale, then I think you can be proud of what will be achieved here. And also related to the audience, because we do have a fantastic audience. 369 people have registered, I understood. Actually, there were so many people coming in already that the video was staggering a little bit, but hopefully you could see the message. And the audience, entrepreneurs, but also investors, which are very important for the session, intermediaries, corporations, foundations, and policymakers. Very briefly on the ambition of us. Actually, what we try to achieve is make climate scalable, climate projects scalable, both from the DFCD fund perspective, as well as, maybe more importantly, make it scalable for the local entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are key in this story. And again, what Irene said, please feel free to help us with this scalability ambitions interactively on the chat or later via the Q&A session, possibly. DFCD, again, the video was shown, but just briefly on the screen shown here, the consortium part is very briefly on what DFCD is. Indeed, as the video showed, 160 million from the Dutch government. So it's the Dutch government provided for climate projects. And climate project, we talk about climate mitigation and particularly climate adaptation. So adaptation / resilience. Further to this, it's also good to know that with this fund, this 160 million fund, we try to provide a solution combining development activities with grant funding or technical assistance by partners, combining that development activities towards a long-term finance solution. And that brings me to the last point to mention on this slide, the consortium, because you see the upper part of the slide shows WWF and SFV, they work together with grant funding, with technical assistance to boost projects in the development stage. WWF is very good and well known as a conservation NGO. SFV is very good at working with communities as a development organization. They help developing these projects and then they move them together with the client, the local entrepreneur, towards a financeable solution, either on the land side, the left part on the screen shown. So on the land side is talking about forestry, agriculture, project, ecological systems, or on the water side, that's the right part. The left side, investment FMO does as the fourth consortium partner, and climate fund managers and does it on the water side, a long-term finance solution with equity mostly on the water side. So development with SFV and WWF, and then long-term investment solution either by FMO as a development bank or climate fund managers. And during these sessions, this will become more live with really striking examples. And if we go to the, for instance, to the distinction around the world, then it's quite clear that we are on the right platform here. We can do many countries, except from more or less we often call the Western world. We have a global mandate. But having said that, we have a very clear focus on Africa. The green part is really the focus country of us. So Africa is key. The DFCD wants to invest in Africa. And if we look at the specific projects, which we also have a slide prepared for to you to show where we stand now as DFCD, then I would like to highlight in particular on the Africa side, where we have a couple of countries that are quite key. We have relatively more projects in Uganda, in Kenya, and in Zambia. And hopefully it's readable on the screen, the examples here. So we have, we are already quite on progress with 28 projects around the world, and then very clearly a focus on Africa, across whole Africa. So these three countries are key, but we can do much more in other countries as well. And at the COP, the climate event, the climate COP in Glasgow recently, we also announced to do more in Africa as DFCD, and we are working on dedicated events, for instance, not only in Zambia, where we already have a couple of projects, but also, for instance, in Tanzania, for increasing our business development and do matchmaking events with local entrepreneurs. We are here in East Africa, in Kenya, Nairobi. A couple of projects will get extra attention during this lively session, which is SocoFresh, a PV-powered solution for refrigeration. So actually refrigeration solutions for agriculture projects. We also give some attention to solar water solutions in Kenya, which is also with PV power solution, but then for providing specific water access at a very affordable price. But also Uganda will be highlighted with a solution from Mandalus Energy, providing biogas, fertilizer, and electricity out of biomass. I would like to finalize these introductory words on showing, for your easy reference, the focus sectors we are really dedicated to, and that's on the land side, forestry, food, and ecological systems, and on the water side, sanitation, water, and oceans. And again, it starts on the top side of the screen with origination via SMV or WF, and then we go down towards the investment solution on the land side by FMO, or on the water side by climate fund managers, and then dedicated to these sectors. And both WF and SMV, but also local entrepreneurs will tell more about it, how it works in practice. So thank you very much for your attention until now, and please, I would like to hand it over again to Irene as our moderator.
Thank you, Art, and really quite inspiring in terms of the DFCD being a relatively new fund, but really supporting 28 different projects in very vulnerable regions to support people to become more resilient to climate change. I can see already there is a question that has been posed on chat for you, but I think we will respond as soon as the next presenter finishes. But thank you very much. I've quite really learned a lot in terms of just that brief introduction that you've done about DFCD, and I hope the participants also have learned something and they'll be ready with many questions for you. So our next presenter is Mr. Ian Isherwood. He works for WWF Kenya, and he manages the DFCD project in Kenya. And he will take us through a deep dive of what are bankable nature solutions and how DFCD supports such interventions to make sure they are investment ready. As Art mentioned earlier, WWF and SNV handles the origination facility, and then the investment scaling up now is now targeted towards the two, like either land or even water. So over to you, Mr. Ian.
Thank you, Irene, and thanks for the introduction, Art. As Irene said, Ian Isherwood here. I am the WWF Kenya lead for DFCD projects across Kenya. I'll be giving you a high-level overview of the DFCD and what we consider as bankable nature solutions and the support provided. So we have a big gap in financing the 17 standard development goals. Unfortunately, there is no standard method to measure the SDGs, but it has been estimated that there is an annual 2.5 trillion per year financial gap between what is needed and what is currently flowing into the SDGs. This varies across each of the different SDGs, but generally each one is receiving only a third of what is required. So this basically means new and innovative approaches to financing the SDGs are desperately needed if we hope to reach the goals by 2030. This is a global financial overview of the capital that we see. As you can see in the green, philanthropy and global development assistance is being deployed into these sectors, but it is not expected to triple in the coming years. So that's why we need more and more support to support the SDGs. In 2019, philanthropy and global development assistance made up less than 0.5% compared to the total global financial capital. However, thanks to greater interest and awareness, this global capacity is increasingly looking for ways to support SDGs. And in doing so, we're looking to support more bankable nature solutions. Now, I'm going to quickly show you a quick video from the WWF that summarizes what a bankable nature solution is and gives you an idea of the pipeline we're looking to build.
We're facing a climate and nature crisis which undermines the fabric on which our economies are based. Each year, we fall $2.5 trillion short of financing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Philanthropy and public finance alone will never fill this gap. But the tides are turning. Private investors are now willing to put their money into sustainable bankable projects. From large-scale forest restoration, climate-smart agriculture to wastewater treatment plants, bankable projects are clever investments that generate financial returns while building more resilient ecosystems, societies and economies. The only problem is there's been no pipeline of bankable projects, even though investors are keen to get the ball rolling. Because of that, financiers continue to invest in projects that degrade our ecosystems and ability to adapt to climate change. Regrettably, communities, businesses and countries end up paying the full social and environmental costs of these investments. WWF have crafted an innovative solution to blend public and private finance to create a pipeline of scalable, bankable projects. Redirecting financial flows into more sustainable projects is critical to the health of our natural resources. Thanks to our global expertise and extensive presence on the ground, WWF is well placed to make these financing opportunities happen now.
Great, so that was just a quick overview of what the bankable nature solutions are, the pipeline, and now I will try and summarize what a bankable nature solution is. At the DFCD, we define these as a project, company, or organization that has a positive impact on people and nature at a landscape level. And it's important that they generate a positive financial return so that we can really start attracting the private investors, so the private sector, and start engaging them in a more meaningful way. Some of the reasons or the suggestions are down there, but I'll quickly move on because of time. And focus, so through these bankable nature solutions, what are we trying to achieve? Basically, we're looking to build climate resilient economic growth. And through this, our outcomes are to achieve lower greenhouse gas emissions, climate resilient land use and ecosystems, climate resilient water and sanitation, and of course, climate resilient food security. And that is all fairly high level. But, and I'm guessing a lot of people will say that, but the how and why we do this is the interesting part. I'm going to quickly talk to you about the difference between a bankable nature solution and a nature-based solution. So what you see on the screen on the far left, you'll see traditional investments. Traditional investments are typically focused on pure profit, whereas on the right is a nature-based solution, and that is purely social. The nature-based solutions are typically philanthropical donations, grant funding. So what a bankable nature solution is we're blending the two together to still be able to give the private sector the profits that they seek, but also still have the impact that we want on the environment and the people around us. So as Art has already mentioned, this is the structure of the DFCD. There's a consortium of 4, 2 NGOs and 2 development banks, and each one has a specific role to play. There's 3 facilities. In the origination facility, this is where we build a pipeline and graduate them so that they then graduate either to the land use facility or the water facility. FMO manage the land use facility, and the water facility is managed by the climate fund managers. There are 4 key themes, as mentioned already, and that is water and sanitation, environmental protection, agriculture, and forestry. So creating a bankable nature solution, like any business, is not easy and requires a lot of effort and support, especially in the early stages. This graph that we have up now typically shows the typical life cycle of a project from the idea stage, as you can see from the far left, all the way through the piloting until the scaling. So where does the DFCD fit in terms of the support? We fit there right in the middle. So through grants and blended finance, the DFCD helps support projects to investor readiness. We think this is one of the most critical stages for a lot of projects and a lot of ideas, because this is where they require the technical support, additional grant funding to make sure that they can achieve that investor readiness and start attracting that private sector investment. I'll quickly take you through the process. So we have a stage gate process. Our stage gate process is designed to support projects at all stages. The facility is set up in a way that stage 1 and stage 2 serve as a pipeline for the development to stage 3. That's where you'll graduate eventually. Different support is offered at each stage, from stage 1, 2, and 3, and all projects will have to fit into, when they fit into a stage, we're always looking to graduate them to stage 3. So at stage 1 is when we structure a project. This is typically early stages, and we can offer a grant of up to 50,000 euros. In stage 2, this is when we start developing the project, and the grant is up to 100 to 350,000. But do note at stage 2, there is a co-financing requirement. So that means you'll have to match the fund that you are raising for, or the grant you are raising, of up to 25 to 50%. And then after stage 2, after the project has been developed, we then graduate you by taking you to an IC. The IC is made up from an individual from each one of the consortium, and the projects are typically raising anywhere between 15 million euros at that stage. Now for the criteria, I'll briefly touch on some of them. Yes, I'll briefly touch on some of the criteria required to access the DFCD fund, but this will also be mentioned later by Tigger from SMV, who has another presentation after this. So I will just focus on 1 or 2 areas. Of course, projects seeking funding from the DFCD should have a substantial climate impact and benefit vulnerable groups, especially women. As you can see, commercial viability is also very important. So being able to attract the private sector is something that we are always focused on. And of course, national ownership, co-investment, and the long-term need for financing are also worth mentioning. I will focus on national ownership because a lot of people do ask, what does national ownership means? It basically means that the project that you are suggesting or putting forward to DFCD, it must align with the national development plan. So the plans that have been set out by each country, they should be aligned with what the project is looking to do in the long term. Now, due to time, I'm going to end it there, but I'm sure if there's a few questions, I'll happily answer them after this or towards the end of the show. Any questions or if any clarity, please feel free to ask and I'll be happy to share more.
Thank you so much, Ian. It's quite informative for us in terms of understanding what are bankable nature solutions. How are they different from the traditional investment opportunities, and how people actually how the facility or how they support the graduation stages for each of the support. So thank you. We've got several questions. We've got actually a lot of questions. Thank you to our participants for really posing so many great questions that hopefully we'll be able to tackle all of them. But maybe before we go to the chats or the questions from the audience, I would like to pose 1 or 2 questions. 1 question for Art and 1 question for Ian, and it will maybe a bit summarize what everybody is asking, hopefully. So the first question, especially to Art, is do you have, as FMO, do you have greater focus on climate adaptation or mitigation projects? And what are the opportunities you actually see for investing in adaptation projects within East Africa? And the question for now, Ian, is how do you assess if a project is scalable? In other words, when is a project scalable? You've talked about the different stages, but when does it become scalable? And for the person who's asked about the currency, it's in euros. The fund is 160 million euros amongst the 4 main partners that were mentioned earlier. So over to you, Art.
Yeah, thank you. So the 2 parts of the question, first regarding adaptation, mitigation, FMO, and then East Africa. Starting with the first part, FMO has a huge experience in mitigation projects. FMO was one of the key players in the renewable energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa quite some time already, purely dedicated to mitigation. So actually the greenhouse gas story, avoiding greenhouse gases by having renewable energy on the grid instead of maybe more polluting solutions. And try to do it all as much as possible with an inclusive concept, also targeting people who don't have access to the grid with off-grid solutions, etc. But the adaptation space was more or less a bit neglected, adaptation/resilience. But we are not the only one. The whole world actually neglected adaptation. So now with this DFCD fund, actually, we have a kind of quite, I think, a striking example, and one of the first funds that's really dedicated in particular to climate adaptation. And adaptation meaning actually being resilient from both human beings or populations, as well as the ecological system being resilient against climate change. If we link that towards East Africa, then I think we have quite a number of projects in East Africa already doing that with this DFCD fund. We have a community carbon project where WWF is working on establishing a carbon credit schedule to increase revenue streams for forestry-related projects linked also to communities. We have a smallholder biofertilizer and an energy project in Uganda as well, which actually will be further explained today with Peter being on board as a local entrepreneur from Uganda. We have in Kenya a resilient farmer input project. We have a mobile PV solar refrigeration project. So there are quite a number of projects already running in East Africa, including also a smallholder micro plantation model in which we already invested actually millions. So that's already past the investment stage with investments from FMO of around 5 million in smallholder micro plantation, which is both linked to mitigation because it captures actually greenhouse gases and forestry for smallholders, but it's also very clearly towards adaptation because this is plantation on degraded land that cannot be used for other sources, and it increases actually very clearly the income from the farmers, while at the same time using land that cannot be used for other purposes. So hopefully this sheds a little bit of light towards your two questions.
Thank you so much, Art. I think it does. Over to you, Ian, on how do you assess if a project is scalable?
So it's a very good question, and there's not one answer for that. I would say that every project is different because they're coming in at different stages. So at the early stages, we'll need to look at the general market and what they've achieved so far. If it's stage 1, then we'll look at what they've already done so far. Stage 2, typically the projects are a little bit more developed and they might already have that demand. So they can't keep up with demand. They already have a lot of things in place. And then they have, they're just looking to scale. So for the scalability of a project, we look at it in different ways, but it always comes down to how much demand will that have and how big the impact it would have on the community and the areas that they're set up in.
Thank you. We'll now pick 2 questions from the chat, and the first question goes to Art. One of the participants asked, how does DFCD focus on air quality improvement?
Exactly. Yeah, now that's a very good question. It's sometimes difficult to address everything, but if you talk about the adaptation, which is the key aspect of DFCD, you talk about working on being resilient against climate change, then often you also have indirectly already a clear link towards air quality and everything that's related to pollution, because we try to help smallholders, farmers being resilient against climate change, and also work then, for instance, with sustainable input, sustainable seeds, and a sustainable way of also having irrigation involved, and all the things. Because you establish that on a sustainable way without actually getting the land be depleted completely, actually this also means that you do not use a lot of fertilizers and chemicals to improve the quality of these crops. So these are, although not the key focus, very much interlinked automatically already.
Thank you. I think even when Mr. Paul from Mandulis will be presenting, will talk a bit more on the issue of air quality, because Mandulis Energy is also focusing a bit on that. For Ian, we've got 2 additional set of questions. They are actually related to financing. And the first question is, is a company required to have 5 million in assets or revenue for stage 1? And the other side of that question is, does the origination facility require matching funding in both stage 1 and stage 2? Maybe you could clarify that.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'll answer the last question. So for stage 1, it is typically an outright grant. So no co-financing is required in that. But at stage 2, there is the co-financing required of 25 to typically 50%, depending on the project. As for the 5 million assets at stage 1, no, that isn't expected. But of course, you're expected to get there within 3 years when you are at stage 3 to be able to seek the next round of investment, which is typically into Series A.
Oh, thank you so much to both Ian and Art. I think for now we'll pause the Q&A session. We'll have 30 minutes to add towards the end to actually tackle more questions. And we'll move to the next presenter, who is Mr. Tigere Muzenda from SNB. At the moment, we've learned much about what is bankable nature solutions and an overview of how the DFCD supports such interventions and the various graduation stages that a venture has to go through. Now, I think the question is, how does DFCD actually support the project? And how can you join as a potential investor or somebody who's already running a business that is bankable, that is a bankable nature solution? How can you join this journey? And what are some of the small and even big things that can make it become a success? So to further expound on this, I would like to invite Mr. Tigere, who is the Regional Investment Officer and Project Manager Sub-Sahara Africa for the Dutch Climate Fund, to talk about this. He is currently based in Kenya. Over to you, Mr. Tigere.
Thank you, Irene. Good morning, good afternoon to our audience, wherever you may be. My name is Tigere Muzenda, Regional Investment Officer for the DFCD. I'm based in Nairobi in Kenya, but I cover Sub-Saharan Africa together with our colleagues in our various country offices. So we appraise projects and we take them to the investment committee, where they are then decided upon to be provided a grant and technical assistance, which I'll talk more on as we move on to the presentation. Thank you. Right, those are just some of the quotations, quotes we have seen from various eminent people. May his soul rest in peace. That's Desmond Tutu talking on the environment. And we also have the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, talking about climate change no longer being a far-off problem, and we can begin to associate with that. And we even have the investors, private sector, like in Unilever, they now consider Africa as facing a big challenge on climate change, and it is one of the biggest risks to growth. Move on, right. Let's move on. We have our DFCD, Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. And as the name implies, we are looking at climate change, we are looking at development, and we are saying, what do we do? What challenges do we face? And how do we tackle these problems? The problem we have, as indicated earlier in the previous slide, is that we have in Africa degrading landscapes. And these landscapes are valuable to us. The landscapes are important. And the DFCD has got what we call a landscape approach. By landscape approach, we are saying in any country that we intervene, we look at the climate vulnerable areas and we say, what is it that the DFCD can do in these areas? Who can we work with in those areas to alleviate the challenges that are being faced by businesses and community? And we then designate an area. You will see in a short while that in Zambia, for instance, we have what we call the Kafue Flats, which is an important geographical area because it's an area that drains rainfall into that area. But it is again faced by climate change threats because there is human encroachment, and sometimes there's flooding, during other times there is drought. What can we do working with companies in those areas to protect the ecosystems and to improve biodiversity? What impact can we have on the communities and the companies that are working in those areas? And we don't forget that there is the human element. What can we do to improve the plight of the human society that is found in those areas? And all of these are the results of climate change. We are going to be looking at what it is that we can do to assist the companies on one side and to assist the communities that we face in those areas, but with a view to saying, how can we enable them to adapt to climate change? How can we make them more resilient to climate change? And how can we make their situation more sustainable as they go ahead in business and in life, as the case may be? Next slide. The DFCD, as earlier presented by Ian already, we have the origination facility, which is the starting point, with SNV and WWF as the pipeline builders. We look for, we identify, and we take business cases to the investment committee, at which point they will get a grant and technical assistance, which we can expound later, to meet those early stage costs that they come across and be able to move on. So we are helping to de-risk the businesses and make them more attractive to financiers. And the finance comes in the form of the land use facility by FMO, which covers agriculture, forestry, agroforestry, energy for productive use, and related activities. The water facility is managed by the climate fund managers, looks at water, sanitation, and health, and the cyclical economy. And these are the areas that we, the DFCD in totality covers. How do we assist? And I think part of that has already been covered by Ian, thanks very much. We look at identifying the business cases that have a climate change angle, and we work with them to structure their business cases. In most cases, we get 2 or 3 pages. For this project, this is what I want to do. And then we say, how can we help improve this project, right? So in some cases, there's a lack of information. It doesn't quite articulate the climate change angle, and the business case is not well articulated. So we work with the sponsors and say, how do we build the case? Because we think it makes sense. And these are the barriers that the business people face, that they've got an idea, they don't know how to put it across and to make it more attractive to the investor. We also go on to say how because they lack capacity in putting this initiative together, how can we structure it in such a way that it makes sense to a potential investor? It makes sense to even an external one who may want to come in into your business and as a third-party investor. And we help to develop this in a way it is helping to de-risk the project. When you get to stage 3, the financiers look at it and say, oh, okay, now we've got a case that makes sense, let's work on it and see how we can finance. So that's what the origination facility does. Some of the activities that are financed or that are supported under the origination facility are situations like you want to do a market study, you want to do an environmental impact assessment, you want to do a multi-stakeholder engagement. Maybe your business requires that you get certain licenses, permits, and certification for you to be able to get to your markets. All those activities are funded under a grant, the minimum 100,000 euro, maximum 350,000 euro to support some of these activities. Over and above the grant, we give you technical assistance from our various experts within our various business units within SNV and WWF. So you may want to be helped to put in place the building blocks for certification. Maybe it's forest stewardship certification, maybe some organic certification that you need. We've got people within our ranks who are experts in putting these building blocks together so that you can get certified, you have access to your markets, and you can make business. And you move on doing all these activities. They may take 3 to 18 months. The shorter, the better. Once it is done, we help you put in place a comprehensive business plan, which we then introduce you with to our financiers, whether it's under the land use or water facility. You get financed, you implement your project, and you move on with your business, right? How do you qualify for this assistance? Is again, riding on what Ian has already indicated, what I want to point out is commercial viability. Remember that this facility is targeted towards the private sector, largely. In some cases, we may have triple P arrangements put in place, but we target the private sector. It is the realization that in some cases, if a business is dependent on donor funding, look at what happened in 2020 and 2021 when with the pandemic coming upon us. A lot of funding was diverted from businesses that were receiving them to humanitarian assistance, and your business suffers because it was dependent on donor money. So we want your business to be able to stand alone, be able to make its own money, finance its own activities. Should there be assistance coming in, it should be the minority portion, but it should be commercially viable, make your own money and be able to support your business. And it also helps in the sense that if a business is commercially viable, it continues in perpetuity and hence continues to deliver the impact that we hope on jobs, on women empowerment, on youth empowerment, and on environmental protection, as well as biodiversity and other related activities. This is related to the real marker. that the business should be able to promote biodiversity, avoidance of deforestation, and also promote largely climate change adaptation. Mitigation becomes a smaller component. We move on and say we have eligible countries, sorry, the same slide. Eligible countries are Dutch priority countries, one, and also less developed countries. We promote national ownership, as already earlier indicated by Ian. We want local business people to be able to own their businesses and run them and be able to deliver the impact in their own countries. May foreign partners is acceptable, but we want to promote national ownership, which is also in alignment with the national goals, be they on environmental protection, on the SDGs, and also on other activities that may be nationally attractive. So we want to provide medium to long-term funding, which in most cases is limited in our countries, in less developed countries. There are activities that we ordinarily do not finance. These are the excluded activities. If an activity promotes deforestation, obviously it's a no-no. If an activity is directly promoting the use of fossil fuels, we want to be able to encourage you to change and use clean, renewable energy. And so fossil fuels, nuclear energy are not some of those that we would happily finance. The size of the organization, again, as earlier indicated, in various stages, of course, but at the end of the day, we want a business to be able to generate a minimum turnover of 5 million euro and have an asset base of not less than 5 million euro. And in financing, we're also looking at it and saying you should be able to borrow not less than 5 million euro. But I saw already questions arising to say, so what happens with small businesses? What necessarily we do is, while the minimum threshold is 5 million euro, up to 10 million euro for the land use facility, we also want to cater for small businesses that are less than, or have capacity to borrow less than 5 million euro. What do we do? There is discussion currently going on where we will create a small facilities fund, which will house those that are not able to borrow 5 million and above. So you are not forgotten, you are catered for, and we can discuss each case as it comes. We do promote co-investment. There should be, investors should be able to put skin in the game. This is your business, and you should be able to commit to it by showing, by putting in place also your own contribution, be it at the origination facility with your contribution towards the meeting the early stage costs, 25 to 30%, but also in financing, we also expect you to contribute so that you own your business, you own your project, and you have commitment to it. Financial additionality that we provide in all this is that in most of our countries, because financial markets are not fully developed, they are struggling and capital resources are scarce, the DFCD brings in that grant element, technical assistance, but also at the end of the day, medium to long-term funding, which is not readily available in our economies. What have we done already in some of these activities? I saw a question, someone asking, what can we do in East Africa? We have a project already that is in implementation at the origination facility level, which means they are doing those early stage costs that help, early stage activities that help to de-risk the project. Solar water solutions. This is a project using technology developed in Finland, which purifies high salinity water and brackish water using only solar power. So what they've done in Kenya, or what they're going to be doing in larger scale, is that they have talked to a number of counties, but currently working on one county, in which they will install this equipment at boreholes between 150 and 150 boreholes. This area is semi-arid to arid. It has got boreholes that have got high levels of salinity. The water is not good to drink, it's not healthy, and it's not easy to use in a domestic setting. So the equipment helps to draw water from the borehole, put it in a storage tank, and it draws that water, go through the filtration and purification system, and treat the water using solar power as indicated on this graphic. And then the water is cleaned, the reduction of salinity to WHO standards, removal of impurities to WHO standards, and the water is then stored in another tank ready for consumption. It is dispensed to consumers through a kiosk system, which means you use mobile money technology to buy your tokens. You go to the machine, to the kiosk, you punch in your PIN code that has been given, you put your container under the tap, and the quantity of water you have bought is poured in there. So there is inclusivity in the sense that we are looking at even those that are not banked, they can use mobile technology to buy water and be able to use it in their houses. And the beauty of it is that this technology uses only solar power. So we've gotten rid of grid power, we've gotten rid of fossil fuels where you may have used generators. And it has already been tested in Abu Dhabi, it's working very well. It has been tested in Namibia, and some equipment has been donated also that we invest in Namibia where they are using this. And it's now coming to Kenya where it is already going through the origination facility, after which most likely by the end of this year, the actual implementation over the 150 to 200 boreholes will be taking place. That's the success we've had so far on one project, but we've got more. We'll show you a video of the next project we'll talk about. Thanks very much. This next one is called Soko Fresh. It is a cold chain technology company that has already started operating in Kenya, and the DFCD has come when others have already also come onto the table to together assist this company. What is the problem? The challenge we are facing in our less developed countries is one of food insecurity, high greenhouse gas emissions, and water and land resources wastage. As we can see in this graphic, that for fruits and vegetables in sub-Saharan Africa, there's often a 50% post-harvest loss on fruits and vegetables, and about 20% for cereals and 40% are for roots and tubers. This means when you've planted your crop and you now want to harvest and take it to the market, the moment you harvest, sometimes you put it in your house and you wait for transport. Even when the transport comes, you put it on an open truck and you travel 100 kilometers to the market. And during that, all that time, there's degradation of your product. By the time it gets to the market, you can't sell it at the price that you thought you'd realize, and that affects the household income. Over and above that, we see that a lot of this product then gets wasted, where it is thrown into the out in the open, maybe in the landfills, and there is a lot of carbon emission that then happens when the product is rotting out there in the landfill. There is a lot of water that is then wasted because you use a lot of water, whether it's a smallholder farmer or a large-scale farmer. You have used a lot of water in the planting and growing that crop in the processing and getting it ready for the market. And that water, we take it as wasted because the product is then eventually not sold. The farmland that you have used tracts of land, you've used fertilizer, labor, and chemicals, but you can't sell half of this crop. So there's a 50% loss. But over and above that, you have wasted that farmland because you have produced a crop which you can't take to the market. So all this is a result of inefficiencies and inadequacies that we have in our system. One way of helping that is to say, when you have harvested your crop, you should be able to keep it in good storage, take it to the market in good storage, and be able to sell it in good condition. That way you get a good price for your product. You're not forced to sell because you are afraid of losing it, but at the end of the day, the household incomes are enhanced. So this is the technology that Soko Fresh brought to Kenya. Developed in India with EcoFrost and being used in Kenya with local participation, local ownership also. What they do is they've got mobile cold chain. The 40-foot and 80-foot containers that we see on the ship in the ICs, they've been converted and installed with refrigeration technology, right? Which has got very little GHG emissions. The technology uses solar power, purely solar power, nothing else. The container is taken on a flatbed truck out there in the smallholder farming area and stationed there. It's offloaded and stationed there. So as you harvest your avocados, your tomatoes, your French beans, and other fruits, you can harvest them as and when they are ready and when you want to. And you take them to the nearest container and have it stored there. We've got so many hubs that are being set up in various farming areas. So you just take your crop, have it stored in the nearest hub for 2, 3, 4 days, even a week, depending on how fast that container fills. When it's full, a truck comes, lifts the container, it's all refrigerated, takes it to wherever you're selling the product. It may be 20 kilometers away, 100 kilometers away, it gets there in good condition. Sometimes it's also going for export, and you can then have it shipped in good condition and you get to the market in good condition. So this is what is happening as shown in this graphic. What that means is that we have significantly reduced post-harvest losses as a result of that cold chain, which is lacking in most of our farming areas, because we don't have that, or we didn't have that. But now that we've got a container next to your field, it's taking it there, and then everything happens. So that reduction in post-harvest loss helps to reduce losses in household income. Actually, it's enhanced because we sell at a good price. It helps to reduce carbon emissions because we are no longer throwing so much food waste that is around the markets, if we go around the markets in our towns these days. It also strengthens the adaptive capacity at a number of levels. We are no longer wasting the water because when you use the water, you know it's going to end up in a product that you can sell. And of course, we talked about greenhouse gas emissions. This technology helps us to fill or to complete a number of sustainable development goals, and they're indicated here. We won't go through that detail, but we can talk in detail when you bring your project and you want to talk about this cold chain technology. That's Soko Fresh for you. This is a real project. It's currently operating. So those are some of the things that we're doing in East Africa, but there's more to this than we've presented. Thank you. Now, having gone through about 2 years of the DFCD in operation, it started in 2019, so it's about going to 3 years. What have we learned? What can we do differently? This is when we talk about lessons learned. As we may read about, go about looking at information, we learn that in Kenya, as well as other parts of Africa, there's medium to low adoption of climate smart agriculture. The information at hand tells us so. Yet in Kenya and in other parts of Africa as well, agriculture is the backbone of our economies. But we also note that it is a large emitter of greenhouse gases, about 1/3 in Kenya, and it may be the same in other countries. And agricultural emissions are serious because, one, agriculture forms a large part of our economy, and it emits so much that harms the environment. So what do we need to do? We need to promote adoption of climate smart agriculture. It works on a number of ecosystems, just the graphic here shows us that the green is high adoption, and currently the adoption is only high in maize and beans products with intercropping and conservation agriculture to some extent, and also mulching. But the orange striped one shows us that there is a low and medium adoption. So we need to promote that. We can move on. Other lessons learned in the next slide, that there's generally a misconception of climate finance, where people think that climate finance really relates to free money. As we heard from Ian, climate finance means that we need to have positive impact on the landscape, but also need to have positive impact on returns. So there is a price to the money that we give you. It's not entirely free money. There's a grant, yes, but you also contribute to it. There's technical assistance, there's a cost to it. But even when you talk about the green bonds, sovereign and corporate bonds, and blended finance, there's a cost to it. So bear in mind that the money you will be getting under climate finance is not cheap money. It's not free money. It has got a cost to it, and you need to build that cost into your modeling. There is also still a lack of appreciation of what constitutes climate change, and we can discuss in detail about what adaptation relates to, and this is what the DFCD generally supports, climate change adaptation, which relates to the systems change that help us build resilience and promote sustainability in our operations. Let's move on. Other lessons learned are that there is limited to no involvement of our local financial institutions in green finance. And it is because of underdeveloped financial markets, capital markets, and also we then end up having green finance being dominated by foreign institutions. We really encourage local institutions to get onto the bandwagon. Let's talk about green finance and how we can help each other, enable to expand this to other sectors of the market, to our countries, and so that most people can benefit from the use of green finance. In processing, the challenges we face are that we are slow as entrepreneurs. We don't keep up-to-date records of accounting. And as a result, when you want to make an application for financing, it takes you long because you now have to start preparing your financial statements. And even non-financial information, we normally don't have it documented. And now when you want to do an application, you have to take a long time to prepare these documents. And meanwhile, things are changing. And that means there will be delays in approvals, there will be delays in implementation, and hence delays in realizing the impact that you want to derive. Ticket sizes, we've talked about them. Yes, minimum threshold, 5 million euro, but we are working on a solution that involves creating a small facilities fund, so no one is left out. Let's move on. Lastly, I don't know if it's lastly, but close to, if there is alignment between public and private institutions, we have always seen that there is a positive movement in as far as climate finance and the DFCD's intervention is concerned. If the policies are there and they help to promote private sector investment, we see a lot of things happening, like in this case, in Safisana, in Mali, a project that we've done, and is in origination. And then also we've talked about solar water solutions. Public and private institutions can work together and create a positive impact on the landscape, but also bringing in positive returns to the investors. That's some of the projects that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tigera, for that presentation. I think you've got a lot to share, and next time when you have more time, I think we'll give you more opportunity to actually give us a more in-depth presentation. But I think for me, the critical thing is that the DFCD financing facility, whether the origination facility, land or water facility, they are actually de-risking businesses. And I think this is very critical to ensure that green businesses or businesses that are pursuing a low carbon development pathway are able to grow to benefit both people and nature. And when we talk about people, it cuts across men, women, and even youth, because we are all equally impacted by climate change, and we are also equally impacted by the degradation of the environment. And you find that for some of these businesses, they really rely on natural resources for their input or for production purposes. So that means that we have to be really conscious. And I think looking at what you've said is we are also trying to build the capacity of the businesses that have applied for this facility. And for those who are asking, how do I apply? So just in quick summary, I think we are de-risking. What Tigere has shared in short is that the DFCD facility is actually de-risking businesses for us, and so that they can be able to actually grow to benefit both people and nature. And when we talk about people, I've seen several questions asked about issues of gender. The businesses benefit both men, women, and youth, and those who are most vulnerable to climate change. And at the same time, because we are really encouraging low carbon development pathway, especially for these businesses, they are leaving a smaller footprint on the environment and in terms of their carbon or GHG contribution to overall in terms of climate change. So these businesses are actually positive, nature positive, but also beneficial to everybody as a whole. And I think for us, when we talk about de-risking business, I think it's one of the barriers that a lot of businesses face as they try to grow. And I'm happy to hear that there is consideration for a smaller facility for those that may not be at the 5 to 10 million euros. Also, such questions have been posed on chat in terms of, if I've got a smaller business, can I be able to access this facility? So we hope the good news will be shared soon, so that at least those ones who have got very good innovative businesses can actually benefit from the DFCD. We've got several questions that have been posed, but what I'd like to request is that maybe we tackle them towards the end. We've tried to collate the questions from the chat so that we can invite Mr. Peter Nyeko. He's the CEO of Mandulis. He's actually the co-founder of Mandulis, and it's a company that is based in Uganda, and they are looking at how can they actually use, bridge the gap of energy access by using readily accessible raw materials such as agricultural waste to both enable energy access in terms of electrification, to power vehicles, to ensure that farmers, if they've got losses maybe due to wildlife, human-wildlife conflict, like animals come and maybe destroy their crops, they can actually be able to recoup some of that investment. And Mandulis at the end of the day gets the raw material needed to run their business. So I'd like to hand over to Mr. Nyeko to share more about Mandulis Energy, the journey that it has gone through in terms of the DFCD support, how the business has benefited and grown as a result, and what are some of the hurdles they have faced and some of the emerging challenges they're actually facing at the moment to be able to scale their business. They were a recipient of a grant of about 349,000 euros to actually support the business. Ian mentioned earlier in terms of some of the grant funds, what they're used to support in a nutshell, but we'll tackle that question a bit more in detail. So welcome, Mr. Mandulis, and over to you. I mean, Mr. Nyeko, I'm baptizing you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible and great, wonderful. Yeah, so we're really inspired by hope, you know, and that's what energy does in communities where we all work. And this is something which you know, someone who inspires us a lot, Pope Francis talks about a lot when he had a call a few years back about powering the future of Pope. So that's what we're all about. In the background, you can probably see some of the young people in one of the communities that we're powering already, and that's the first community of the 6 that we will be powering as part of our work together with the DFCD. We'll go to the next one. Yep. So we do know the issue. You know, there's lack of access to electricity in Africa, and many people across Africa are actually farmers in rural areas. And but the big issue with that is, obviously, as we heard earlier, if you don't have access to electricity in rural areas, you end up having to sell crops without processing, and you find that cycle of poverty keeps on going. How we cut that is by solving that particular issue. Next slide. And as I said earlier, and as others have said earlier, there's a lot of value lost without agro-processing, not just cold storage, but actually milling and, you know, cleaning and drying as well. just milling and cleaning and drying maize doubles the price or triples it sometimes, and allows them to reach higher value markets. But that also helps us as energy generation companies, because when people are able to earn more for their crops, which have been processed, they can actually afford to pay for clean cooking fuel and electricity and biofertilizer as well. So great. So we all know the other issue that we're tackling is obviously the issue of clean cooking or the lack of it, which is linked also to the issue of deforestation. And you find on one side, everyone who lives in rural areas that cooks with firewood, they could as well be smokers, whether they like it or not, and they're mostly women and children. But at the same time, there's a lot of deforestation happening in a country like Uganda. We've lost a lot of our forests, due to the use of firewood as cooking fuel, as well as heating fuel in factories. We'll go across. Next one. But this is why we come in. So we look at taking agro-processing waste and agricultural waste. So on one side, maize cobs, rice husk, banana shells. On the other side, banana stems after you cut off the banana fruit, but also adding things like cow dung as well. And we're able to turn all of those bio waste into biogas, and that's able to run generators, generate electricity, but crucially it leaves behind that biofertilizer, and the excess gas that's used to generate electricity is then packaged as a clean cooking fuel. So that's the circular economy that we work with. And this is a photo from one of our locations. You can see there we even use sesame stems as well to add to that. Next one. And we are already working with over 60,000 farmers in Uganda, but with the help of the DFCD, we're now going to be able to double that up to 120,000 farmers in Uganda alone, which is really, really exciting. And with the help of the DFCD as well, we've been able to now begin improving on our digital marketplace, enabling it to add on the more farmers that we're working with in Ugandan communities, as well as in refugee communities around Uganda, but also it's allowing us to go beyond that and look at how we can scale up across the continent. So our model is pretty straightforward. The way we look at it, crops goes to ag processing. We power that ag processing with renewable energy. The residues that come out of the agro processing waste, that's used for powering the power plants. Cooking fuel comes out, electricity goes into a mini grid to power the off-grid community. And of course, the cooking fuel now goes back to help with the cooking, and of course the finished product, which is the process, gives them the additional income that they basically need. And but in terms of the impact on the region that we're looking at the moment in Uganda, the Greater Virunga landscape, once we've got all our 6 plants up and running, we've already began working on getting the first one scaled up to 0.5 megawatt. We will have 6 plants, power plants, energy plants, each at 0.5 megawatt, so a total of about 3 megawatts of power generation, alongside a significant amount of biogas generation as cooking fuel, high grade in cylinders, and also a lot of biofertilizer. Well, you're looking at 60,000 tons of CO2 saved annually, and that's significant. And then, of course, over 1 million trees saved each year when you think of the number of people who are no longer using firewood and charcoal. And one of the things which also happened, and we're grateful to the DFCD, it gave us an opportunity last year to go to COP26, where we pitched for additional funding, and that helped us work on not just improving our digital systems, which we're working on right now as we speak, but also it's enabled us to strengthen our scale up into other African countries. And right now we're in the process of mapping our scale up into Botswana, in Southern Africa, in Zambia, as well as Tanzania. Yeah, and in terms of the impact, what's come on board in addition with the DFC support, there are now an additional 60,000 families in refugee coastal districts in Uganda, and those districts are actually next door to national parks as well. It's quite interesting. So you find that a lot of those smallholder farmers suffer from elephants coming and trampling on their crops, or lion eating their cows. But the fact that we have come in take on the residues that they don't need, that they usually burn. But also the income they get from that enables us to set up for them what's in effect an insurance scheme, so that the crops that are trampled, are insured. But that works for us in two ways. Of course, our colleagues in these ecosystems are able to have their livelihood safe, but us as well, since they're supplying us with waste, the fact that the crops are insured also means that our own feedstock is also insured. So it's a win-win from that angle. And by the time we've got all our 6 power plants up and running, in a few years' time, we will be looking at an impact of reaching up to 1 million people. If you look at that in terms of families, that's in Uganda alone, that's well over 100,000 families. And as I said earlier, we've already identified a significant number of communities in Botswana, a few in Tanzania, a few in Zambia and Malawi that we're scaling up to as we speak. And our digital solution is making that possible. So we're grateful for that. Yeah, so that kind of brings us to the end of what we're talking about. But if I look at what the biggest challenge is for developing a project like this, and that's where the DFCD support has been really useful and really, really helpful, is getting a team on board, a very good team on board on the financial, capital raising side, on the project development side, on the engineering side. Having a strong team on board needs additional resources, and having project development support at this point has enabled us to actually build a very strong team now, based in Uganda, but with additional support with colleagues, based in the UK and based in the Netherlands. And we look forward to actually getting our projects completed in record time, thanks to that support. And if any of you are in Uganda, we welcome you to come and visit the first project site, which is already started work at a small scale. We're near Mission Falls National Park in northern Uganda. And then kind of as we go down towards West Uganda, that's where the next 6 locations will be. So thank you very much, and looking forward to your feedback. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nyeko. It's always interesting and fascinating to hear more about how energy is actually transforming communities, and it's being used for productive use, because a lot of times we do rely on energy for cooking and basic lighting, but we do not move to the next level. And when we move to the next level, then we are able to transform the communities that we are working with and actually contribute to economic growth and conservation efforts. Now, I know at the beginning of the session, we mentioned that we'd have an open Q&A session where we'd get questions directly from the audience. Unfortunately, we are very time barred in terms of we've got less than 11 minutes remaining. So what we shall do is we'll try to pick one or a few questions from chat, which we shall respond to, and they'll be addressed to specific speakers. And in addition to that, for the questions that will not be able to respond to during the session, they'll be responded to as part of the slide when we'll be sharing the slide deck. And in addition, if you've got any additional questions, you may send them through the email address that Leka has shared or has shared in a chat, and then we can be able to address or tackle that. In addition, if you'll be attending the in-person event tomorrow at the Kenya School of Monetary Studies, Tigere and Ian will be there. So please make a point of trying to find them during the event. I know with face mask, maybe not going to be possible, but I'm sure there'll be ways of identifying them. And they can further address some of the questions that you may have that really are burning and require an almost immediate response. So thank you so much, Mr. Nyeko. And maybe I'll start off with a question to you. And is what did you like best about working with the DFCD? I know you are still working with DFCD, but what have you liked most about this engagement?
Thank you very much. What I've loved most about the DFCD experience has been from day zero, interacting with the entire team. DFCD has the team, which includes, the 4 who've been mentioned here, but you've also got other supporting team, from World Startup and others who help guide you through the process. And having that detailed feedback, weekly meetings, going deep diving into the solutions you're proposing, and kind of asking those questions and helping you develop not just the pitching ability, but actually understanding your own business a lot better. That's been really, really helpful. And that's actually helped us actually improve on our offering from what we initially proposed. The feedback has helped us get to a position where we feel this year our offering is significantly more impactful than it was before we even applied. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we hope to see Manduli's energy being in each and every country in Africa so that we can enable energy access for all and transform the lives of the people. I think the next question I'd like to pose to Tigere, and maybe for this particular question, all the presenters could actually touch on it. So if you have already some degree of scale, about 3 million in revenue and 6 million in debt, but are looking to scale more, can you apply for DFCD?
That includes, I think, the person who asked, I think, wanted to also talk about refinancing. That's my assumption. Ordinarily, refinancing is not creating value. It's shifting from one lender to another. So we want to look at projects that are developmental, that add value. If you are 6 million in debt and you have revenue of 3 million, it's a challenge. We would want as a project, even if it has got existing debt, to be the smaller portion, and what you want to do be the bigger portion. So in short, we need to look at those proportions and say, is the project more developmental or more just debt refinancing? Those are some of the dynamics.
Thank you so much. And maybe a follow-up question that ties to that to Ian is, are there types of project design stroke development expenses that the grant actually can or cannot fund? In other words, what is typically funded by DFCD? I think Tigere has mentioned one, but what else is ineligible?
I'd say ineligible. Good question, because it does come up quite a lot. And as you can see from stage 1 and stage 2, the grants are not the biggest. So we shy away from investing in anything too CapEx heavy. So if it's to buy machinery, to build a facility, or to even, put fences up on certain projects, we'll shy away from that because we want to really structure the project before it gets to that. At stage 3, you'll be able to really access the funds that will be able to develop that stage for anything CapEx.
It's quite a lot to go through, and I'm sure our audience, once they go through the website, the link we've shared, they'll be able to get additional information. Now to Art. I know we've talked about like solar powered project, we've got the agriculture facility, the water facility, but does DFCD fund projects like mangrove restoration and even direct conservation efforts, or it's purely business oriented, or it can be a mix of actually business that combines maybe conservation efforts?
Yeah, thanks for that. A very good question again. We can surely do that. We are a climate fund, and adaptation is key, also mitigation, so we should do that. At the same time, we also look at how to combine it with the business model. Mangroves are fantastic actually for us to do so, because it's so crucial from many aspects, including in storage of carbon, but also, of course, from adaptation angle, because it preserves certain areas, from a biodiversity angle. So mangroves are actually the sweet spot for us. What we try to do then is combine that with the business model. For instance, as an example, from Asia and Bangladesh, we work on sustainable shrimp farming linked to also protection of mangroves. We could also work on all kind of carbon credit schedules in order to have it linked to a certain revenue stream. And the same counts for direct conservation. We try to be creative to have at least a kind of a revenue stream in order to make them viable.
Thank you for the response. I'm looking at the time. We've got 5 minutes remaining, and maybe the last question will be to both Ian, Art, and Tigere, but I'll tweak it a bit for Peter. So is on, could you share pointers on what aspects you would like to see highlighted in the applications? And for Peter, what do you think made your project, actually Manduli's Energy, be successful for the DFCD application? So the first question to Ian, Art, and Tigere, what aspects would you like to see highlighted in the applications? For Peter, what do you think made your application successful?
I think if you look at the application, the form has been shared already. It's also on the website. I think I would like to highlight 3 things which are crucial also if we look later on to the investment stage. First of all, the world needs scalability. So the clearer you make your story, it doesn't have to be at this moment extremely large size, as long as the potential is scalable. So please highlight that clearly in the assessment form. And the second one is a little bit linked to the previous question. We try to make a viable model on it, and it's also linked to scalability. If it's not viable, then it will, in the long term, cease to exist, and then it's also not scalable. So make the case how it is made viable. And then the third thing I would like to highlight, we see a lot of good ideas, but actually it's very difficult to see who will be actually our key client going forward. You can have ideas, but there needs to be a kind of organization behind it to really make it big. So viability, scalability, and the ultimate client of ours, or that can be a cooperative, or it can be an aggregator, or it can be a microfinance institution, or the company itself. So these things I would like to stress here.
Thank you, Ian.
Thanks a lot. I would add on that, so obviously the scalability, but I'll also say the impact. So the impact in the landscape. So the communities that the project has around it, they should be very focused on the stakeholder mapping, understanding who they're working with, understanding the environment that they are impacting as well. So if there are any environmental aspects to it, they should have a clear understanding. If not a clear understanding, they should have some sort of general understanding so that they know what they need to address, because then that will make that application a little bit easier for us to then for us to understand that they know what they're doing and that they have a clear understanding from the project.
Thank you. Tigere?
Yeah, I won't take much of your time because I think Ian and Ati have really articulated that, but it is important that a project sponsor be very clear on what the climate change angle of that project is. How does it build resilience? How does it become sustainable? That's what's important for me. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Nyeko?
Thank you very much. I'll say the most important thing was making sure every question was answered. And the application form has a lot of guidance. So that helped a lot. But more importantly, in terms of proving some of the other responses, we actually have to go on the ground and communicate with the community once again and let them know that we were applying. There are at least 12,000 families who will tell you exactly what we do and exactly when we applied and what we applied for and how they link up into that. Having a pilot that's already running with customers who can give feedback, that also helps a lot. And then having a clear path to scale and hopefully having the people who are ready to walk with you along that journey as well. So making sure that as you seek the support of the DFCD, you've also got a good idea of not just your customer base and your stakeholders and your ecosystem, but also those who will join you in that journey alongside with it. It's kind of making sure you tick all those boxes, but beyond anything, as our colleague said earlier, make sure the impact is strong, the business model is viable, and you're committed to grow together with the ecosystem around. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are right on 12:30 on the dot. But I think with this presentation, I hope we have all learned something in terms of the application process, what we should look out for as we are applying, or as we apply for the DFCD funding, scalable impact. We are engaging the communities that we are working with. For the business is actually going to be beneficial to everybody. And we've mentioned there how you can engage the DFCD. There are four main ways, but we've shared also the application link and the email that you can use to submit your application in case you have one. And also in case you need further information, with the apply link, you can get the additional information. And as we close, maybe just 10 seconds for each of the presenters. What is your call to action as we close the session?
Right. For me, it's let's engage. There's a lot to climate change finance that we can do. It's not business as usual, but we certainly can make strides. Thank you.
Maybe I can add on that. We combine inclusiveness with climate. And let's just do it. Take a challenge, look at our website, look at the application form. And if you think that you have a model that matches our criteria, just go for it.
To add on that, I would also say that within our networks, I think everyone here might have a very strong network. So if there are other projects that maybe were not here today, please do share the application link with them to see if they would be a good fit for DFCD.
And I'll just say it is possible to have solutions which tick all the boxes, which help the world become a better place. Looking after both climate, looking after people, and also making sure it is profitable. It is feasible, so go for it.
Thank you all. Thank you to the wonderful presenters and to the participants. We hope we shall engage more in this discussion, and we hope to receive plenty of applications so that we can now begin the work of supporting the next businesses to scalability. If you've registered for the event virtually, please join our booth. There is a link that was shared by Loika. I've also shared it on chat. So thank you very much, and wishing you a good day or a good evening from wherever you may be. Thank you.